Today we have a very special event that I'm grateful for Tom Truitt, who has a wonderful program called Who Knew, and the smartest people in the room. And these are the smartest people in the room. And please welcome Tom Truitt, Peter Shapiro.
Welcome, everybody. The only thing I want you to hear about me is my name and the fact that I am the luckiest guy you've ever met. And the reason I feel that way, and I say that all the time, is I'm fortunate to make my living in the music industry despite having no musical talent whatsoever, but I get to hang out with guys like that occasionally. And today you're going to learn a lot about one of my heroes, and I call him that because there's nobody...
Strong word.
Well deserved. There's nobody in this business that I hold in higher regard or greater respect, and it's because he, to me, is the perfect blend of P.T. Barnum, Walt Disney, and Bill Graham. P.T. Barnum basically led a three-ring circus everywhere he went, many times without a net, and always stuck the landing, just like you do. Walt Disney creates magical moments, and that's everything. You live in the magic kingdom wherever you go. And then Bill Graham was the greatest concert promoter ever, and this is the living, breathing version of Bill Graham. And so...
Is this being filmed? Oh, I see a camera. Shh, hope so. Shit.
Well, the reason we're here today is he has just written a memoir. It's right here. It's called Music Never Stops. There's copies of it outside of the room, and I hope each and every one of you will stop by and purchase one on your way out. Peter will sign it. And so I want to get down to it, and I'm so excited to be able to ask him 100 questions, and he's going to have to answer probably 99 of them. I may cut him a little bit of slack. I'm going to borrow a page from his playbook, though, to kick things off. If Peter talks about this in the book, and that is before every show in his buildings, Peter does a tequila shot with the band.
Not every show. Some of them. It's not always before. It's during the show, after the show.
It's usually before the show, according to the book.
Is that what I said in the book? Shoot.
And if he's not in the building, he does it virtually. He'll have the GM of the building get the band together backstage, and they'll do a quick shot. We do. You can tell I brought these from home. Peter, this is some good shit here.
Okay, we'll do it. I have built up an ability to do this and do it hopefully safely. Cheers.
Cheers to you, my brother.
Well, I guess I hope we have a good show.
Thank you all for being here.
We better do a good job now. Okay, we're ready.
All right, let's light this candle. So I got 1,000 questions. First one is, you go off to Northwestern as a film student, supposedly. What were your childhood influences that led you into filmmaking in the first place?
The advent of video was pretty big for me. I graduated high school in 1991. And if you remember back then in 91, it's like the cameras, the JVCs, like they were bigger. It's amazing what you can do with this now. But so in 89, or like 88 probably, in ninth grade, I started playing around a lot with video, like shooting dumb videos. And then I actually had a public access TV show, Channel 35, New York City. It was Dalton Sports Video. Like, it was about the sports at my high school. And loved video, so I applied to Northwestern to do radio, TV, film, and I loved the video stuff, and that was what was my thing, more than music. I went to shows. I got into shows the end of my high school, more like Jane's Addiction with friends, but it didn't lead me. It was a video kid. And I really just had this moment that this show, and maybe it'll come up later, where I went to a Grateful Dead concert in Chicago in March of '93 at Rosemont Horizon, and just had one of those sliding doors experiences, moments that I do believe, like I actually believe that if I wasn't planning to be a concert guy. I was more video, film, radio, TV, film major. But after that night, I basically blended it by having this experience and then going to make a film that summer about what I saw, the Dead, that scene. So I combined my love, and that film got seen by the guy who owned Wetlands, a great rock club, and then and that led me to really being here. I believe that if I hadn't gone to that Dead show, the Dead would have gone to the next town, and I would have just been at Northwestern doing my thing. So it's kind of cool that really is, that's what I know it, that led me here that night.
So you mentioned in the book that you left that show and walked out in the parking lot and it was snowing that night.
Yeah.
Was this during Drums in Space?
I think so. I left the show.
So
Because I was,
quick
I
show
had
of
my own
hands, who got to
drums
see
in
the
space
Grateful
going
Dead?
in my head. Yeah.
Who got to see the Grateful Dead? So everyone understands what Drums in Space is all about. So you had to take a moment.
Yeah, Ken Norrie, I go to this show. It was the second Dead show I'd ever been to. First one was fun, but Giant Stadium, 92, nothing really big happened. I go in Ken Nordine, they had a spoken word guest, special guest. I didn't know what was happening or coming, and all of a sudden, that was going on in the arena. This is true, and I was already, in a place I'd never really been. And I don't know what happened, but I was in the parking lot the next thing I know. I left my friends. Without these phones, how'd we find our friends? I don't remember. I just know I was in the parking lot and saw these kids like me, but they weren't going back to Northwestern. They had like the school bus and the drum circles, and I had never seen anything like that. By the way, that doesn't exist today. There's some other, Dead & Co. or Fish or even a Metallica or a Chili Pepper, any big show, Taylor. There's no scene at a stadium show or any show like what was going on around the Grateful Dead, period. Even with Dead, no way. That was a scene. It was clearly people having a good time, but they were searching for something. I was like, wow, this is drums. And I went to the library the next morning. I don't know how I got back to college, but I got to Evanston. And we talk about doors in music business for a venue, at doors or people lining up to get there early. A lot of the boy band shows, you'll see people line up at 6 a.m. because the GA floor you run to get to the rail, which is it. We still have it, like the Avett Brothers the other day at the Capitol Theater, there'll be a few people 7 hours early to run to the front. So I was at doors for the library, the only time ever. The next day, no, I didn't sleep. I stayed up and I went to the Northwestern Library and I was there when it opened at 9 a.m. or 8 a.m., the only time I'd done that. And I wanted to research what had been done on what I had seen, especially back to the video, documentary-wise. And I found one. A sociology professor in North Carolina had done something about like deadheads. So I found my friend who owned a video camera at Northwood, the guy who had the best one, Phil Brule. And he's this little redheaded dude, unfortunately. He knows nothing about the Grateful Dead. No, nothing. I'm like, hey, do you want to go with me on tour with the Dead in 6 weeks? Because I was like, and he's like, yes. So we go to Auburn Hills. This is a good one. This is in the book. We rented an all-white van, Econoline Ford, F-350, no windows. You've all seen it. We pull in the Palace at Auburn Hills. We've got a big video camera. We're going to make a documentary about Dead Tour, or the people. We pull into the parking lot in this van. In one piece of advice I'd give anyone going to make a documentary on the Dead scene in the parking lots is don't drive in an all-white van with no windows. They're all like, DEA, watch out for this. And we were like, Phil, keep driving. So we were like, we left and drove 3 blocks away, and then we walked back in. And you can see it online, YouTube and Miles to Go, it's called. Pete Shapiro, it's there. So I couldn't get any of the band guys in the film, but I got everybody else outside. And then I got Ken Kesey and Tim Leary and all this stuff. That I learned one lesson when I reached out to Ken Kesey, his wife Faye, to do an interview for my college film. They were very nice, but she's like, Ken's not doing interviews, thank you, good luck with your project. So I was like, shoot, I gotta know, you know. So I waited a bit and then I called back. I got the number and I was like, sorry to bother you, but it turns out I'm gonna be in Oregon in next month in Eugene.
Just gonna be in the neighborhood.
I'm gonna be in the neighborhood. Maybe I could stop by if I'm, and she's like, well, if you're gonna be in the neighborhood, come by. And I wasn't gonna be in there, I just fucking said that. So there's a secret, and it worked. I had this great interview with Ken Kesey on my 21st birthday. I just turned 50, so this stuff's, I've been
21.
doing
You're doing this
now
at 21.
I'm 50. Yeah, I've been doing it pretty much. So what happened is I made this documentary film as a student. Credit to the college. Oh, credit, because they let me get credit. I always tell kids who work with me now, like, try to do stuff while you're in college, because it's like 4 years. I don't think anyone here is really in college, but your kids. It's a good time to try and go do shit, because you're in college. So you have 4 years to fit, you know, and less pressure. So I went and made this big film, or, you know, this hour-long documentary, and then the owner of Wetlands saw it. And I don't know if you want me to keep going with that.
No, we're going to come back to the Wetlands in a minute.
Because that's a whole nother thing. But the film, you know, led me also to being here.
So I have a question, kind of a personal question here. You talk in the book about people around you who've helped you along the way, and one of those very prominently is your father, who was an attorney, who kind of sounds like he was your consigliere. But you were such a remarkable human. You have to have had a strong mom. Your mother must have been incredible, and I'm curious to know about her, because she's not mentioned very much in the book. Can you?
Well, I led with my dad in the book just because in the real world, by the way, the book's really structured. It's not, I hate the word memoir, but it's 50 shows. And me, and what I went through putting on 50 shows. So one of them is Wetlands, or a couple, and I then taking over Wetlands, which the film helped lead to. And I had my dad, you know, Larry Block, who owned Wetlands, which was this great music venue in New York, he called Buy a Deadhead, 4 Deadheads. And he put it for sale, and it was a very famous rock club with unorthodox layout, not like this room where everyone can see us. You know, and when it was sold out, 30% of the people couldn't see the show. Which made it great, because like you would then, that's why I meet people who are always like, yo, I met my wife at Wetlands, or my parents got met there. But and at Bowery Ballroom, which is a perfect venue in New York, or a Metro in Chicago, or Troubadour in LA, like when you can see the stage, you don't go wander off to the bar in the lounge to like hear it, and you don't. That's where you meet your husband or your wife. So I swear, Wetlands has tons of people because it was because you couldn't see the stage, you had to go hang out, and then you met people. And so, anyways, I had Wetlands. And I met Larry, who had been owning this. It's very hard to have a rock club 7 days a week. He was burned out. He opened it in '89 as this home for deadheads. He picked the corner. He's like, I picked the block in New York City where he said, no one will ever want to live. Wetlands, he thought, would be there forever. And he's like, because I picked the exit of the Holland Tunnel. Right there in Lower Manhattan, the Holland Tunnel lets out, and he's like, no one will ever want to live there because the smoke, it's the exit of the Holland Tunnel, all day traffic, all day. And what's amazing is now that's called Tribeca. And what happened is we all got priced out, and he fried out, was looking for someone to continue it. I had just made this documentary film that showed I got it. I went on tour with the Dead, and he was like, you could, I'll give it to you, and you can pay me every month if you continue the mission of the club. It had an all-environmental center. It was pre-internet. So like we'd host meetings for nonprofits because you didn't have meetup.org. You didn't have tech, you did it in real life. So I was like, okay, I'll continue the environmental mission. By the way, the bigger people in New York, the SFXs, Ron Delzers, John Shares, they came around also to take it over. And he'd be like, they're like, let us see the books. And Larry would be like, there are no books. Because it's like, this is fucking Wetlands. Here's the lease, friend. And I am not sure, and do you want it or not? And I was the only one who was so naively genius, really, but dumb, but genius. Now, if someone said to me, buy my business, by the way, there's no books, I'd be like, go fuck yourself. No. But I was 23, and I had this idea. I told my dad, like, well, when you start a new business, there are no books. You have projections. You think where it's gonna go. It's famous already. Like, I know the rent's 23 grand, the garbage is at 1,200, the water bill, Larry would tell me all the things. And it's like a new business, but you know a bunch of it already. And I also was like, I have no kids, no family, I don't need to make a lot. It's just like it's like, this thing's gotta be able to hold like even. And that'll be great to be in the mix of the world. And owning a venue, I just had a feeling and it was, like when we have an idea, we could come up with something here, we can just go do it. So I was like, I really want to, and Larry was gonna give it to me, nothing up front. And my dad leaned in. He was a tax lawyer, there's no in terms of helping me. Like, I didn't know anything. And by the way, if you hire a lawyer to help you in a situation, you don't even understand what the lawyer's saying. If you're 23, that's the truth. Like, I don't know. And if a lawyer's like, but luckily I had my dad as my lawyer, and then everyone on the other side knew Dan Shapiro, like, you can't run around this kid because he's got his dad as his lawyer, and that made it possible.
Amen.
So it's cool. Although then the first night, my first show, I think I told this in the book, like, so I start out Marty Ballin. It's my first big show. I take over Wetlands. I'm like, this is good. Jefferson Airplane, Marty Ballin.
This will be easy.
I got it in the club free. I had 75 grand, or maybe 100, like, in my bank. Like, that's it. Way too little. It was not a rich guy. I had some stock from my grandfather, IBM. I did not have enough to do this, but I just went for it. My dad let me. That show lost $10,000. So I lost 10% of what I had for the whole thing on the first night. And I remember that pit. I still, there's nothing like that pit where you're just like, uh-oh. I was worried. But we scraped and did things and then scraped more. And it did help. I was taking the train. I lived with 3 roommates. And I was a good owner because I was young. So just like last night where I closed Brooklyn Bowl with Lucas Nelson, because I'm not here, I'm not getting up to take my kids to school. I was able at the end of the night when the Disco Biscuits would play to 3 a.m. or name the band, it's done, it's late, I was still there to greet the band after the show and do a tequila shot. We joke about this, but it's just a way of a greeting, and I was able to do that, and those became my friends. We grew up together. I was so young, and they were too.
So the tequila shot's a great example of his relentless attention to detail, and he talks about this in the book as well. Some of the things the business lessons in that book are attention to detail, and one from the Wetlands that I think is fascinating is the basement of the Wetlands was called the Inner Sanctum. Did anyone ever have the opportunity to go to the Wetlands?
Oh yeah, good. Nice.
I spent 3 magical nights there in 1989, and transformative nights, and I wound up in the basement. Holy shit. How did you figure out piping the music into the other parts of the building?
Oh, that was Larry Block. So Larry, who's unfortunately not with us anymore, came up with a couple key things. Because it wasn't built to be a live music venue. It was built to be like a hang, an environmental, social justice, hippie, den, dream land, bar, hang. And it had a little stage area, a thriving music venue that went on to become a legendary, Pearl Jam, Rage Against the Machine, Oasis. We could go down the list of bands, forget about Dave Matthews, Fish, all had their first plays in New York at Wetlands. So it was built, not to be a music venue first, it became one. And so one thing he did was like put music in the bathrooms, and it had this great lounge. Like it was a great place. People, also when something's gone, when it was around, people would be like, I love Wetlands, but dude, you can't really see the stage. And then once it was gone, after 9/11, people would be like, dude, I love that place. It was the best. So it changed, people's remembrance. But one of the things is it was a great place to go to a show. Because even in the lounge or at the bar, if you can hear it well, and you're hanging out in a good vibe, that's a lot of it. And then you meet your wife. So a lot of people loved Wetlands. I also meet people who are like, I went there when I was 16. And I'm like, well, okay, because it was 21 plus. But it was a village. It was amazing. It was only 7,500 square feet, and it had all these different areas. And I've taken that with me since. That I think a great venue is like a village, and the Brooklyn Bowls have that, and they have different areas. You want to have obviously a great main room to watch the show. But it's cool if you can have different pockets in different places, and there's different things. I think that's something that stayed with me. And also at Wetlands, we had to try harder because we had a flawed traditional venue. And so we had to call to book shows and come up with ideas to fill the calendar. My friend booked the Bowery Ballroom at the same time. I don't know if in New York, like the perfect venue, the A venue. They just took holds. They received calls. They have like 6 holds for every day, bands that want to, because that was the hot man. Wetlands, we had to make outgoing calls.
Hustle.
We had to hustle and create things, which in the end made me kind of probably who I am, because we were always looking to create things, power jams and nights, and it was 7 nights a week. I think I've done a show every night since I took it over, and you can hear it in my voice a little bit. But I've done one every night since '96.
10,000-ish, and still.
I haven't
going
been
strong.
at all of them, but if something goes wrong, I say like, if shit went wrong at 4 a.m., they're calling me, and and then you learn from doing it a lot, like what the sound level should be in the bathroom, or that we had security. Our security, which says welcome, not security, like little things. And I talk about one, actually, that's a good one in the book. Try to take negatives and make it a positive. Like I call it like reverse jujitsu. So like security is not a great subject at concert, just the whole thing. There's nothing really super positive about it. Safety, or just the granular part of executing it. The idea of safety, great. So like Fare Thee Well was the Dead 50th anniversary shows. And obviously it was like we wanted the vibe in the stadium to really be cool and good. So I went and went and met with the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, and was like, I got the meeting, and it was like, I would just think this week, this whole thing will go a lot better if you could help us have the police play zone defense kind of approach versus one-to-one man. Like, if we could play zone defense, I think the vibe will just go better. Safety, make sure everything's safe, but like and they did. And I think the whole weekend, and we did 77,000 people times 3 and 50 shows a night, and took over Chicago, and there's like 1 marijuana arrest. They clearly, and they told us at Soldier Field that the mayor's office had called with kind of instructions to that helped. And then we got all the security personnel to wear tie-dyed shirts. They still had like the number, like they were still official security, but rather than a big black shirt, they wore tie-dyed shirts. And that ended up like having material impact. Like if you go into a stadium and all the security dudes are wearing tie-dyed shirts, it changed the environment.
Amen.
Yeah,
That's a
so little
perfect
things like that,
example
yeah.
of his attention to detail. I got one more question about Wetlands, then we're going to proceed to some other topics, and that is, you are an incredible activist, and you were green long before green was cool. Was that because Wetlands was already there, or was that Peter already?
That was started with Wetlands,
Yeah.
probably. I mean, a little bit of me, nature, nurture. But Larry Block, the idea of the club was a home, like where does Amnesty International or Rainforest Action Network in 1992, get people activated? Well, who? Young people usually. Where? The library, the school, the Westin, or the Rock Club. Oh man, we should do meetings at the Rock Club before the show, in that lounge we talked about. So that was the Wetlands model, and young people would come to the meetings. It's too bad, like the internet's good and bad. We all know, we've lost some of that, because now you could just do the Zoom or you digital, but it was an analog place, and that we would meet up. That was the idea of the meetings. And I got turned on. And listen, those meetings, they did these direct actions. Could be a little scary, they'd be in these meetings planning to go to the board meeting of Heineken and chain themselves to the front doors of the Heineken building, shit like that. So sometimes we were and then I had to get he gave me Wetlands, but I agreed to keep the funding going. Wetlands, the Rock Club funded an environmental center, 3 employees, part-time, for $100,000 a year. That was a big part of it. We had info on the walls, paper, not digital. You could sign petitions. And these companies hated these upwardly mobile, upper middle class, 20-year-old kids, signing petitions out there, getting press. And but I remember the environmental things. I didn't even put this in the book. They were like, yo, by the way, just so you know, all good, but our phones are being tapped by the FBI. And because some of the actions, they were chaining themselves and doing things. I don't never know if we actually were, but I felt it was important to support. I wasn't probably that far left on all this, but it was important for them to have a place to gather. My role, or Wetlands' role, was to protect that, and we did. It was cool.
So that led to a number of other very interesting, very high-profile activism-related shows and events. Talk about Earth Day, when you put on 8 massive concerts around the world in one day. Dude,
it was America. So Earth Day was something that was just surprised. I got involved at Wetlands. We did all these environmental kind of movement stuff, and it's surprising to me. Still today, I wish it was bigger. It was very not centralized. Everyone's doing different Earth Day events, schools and counties. So we created something called the Green Apple Festival. And the idea was to unify and do an event at Golden Gate Park and Central Park and Lincoln Park in Chicago on the same day. And I actually learned, this is a good story, the power of we got a big sponsor, and we got the money to put on 8 of them in one day, which was cool. I met a lot of my friends. I got to hire production people, different people in each town, and work early with bands, the Nevilles or the Meters. I love bringing on the soul, New Orleans, jazz, funk kind of music. And that's uplifting, soulful stuff. And combine that with, Wetlands worked with these petitions on the walls and the music playing at the same time. You could feel when you can have a purpose, when music can have purpose, and it's hard to do, and now it's harder, I think, because so much been done, but it can work. And you felt that at Wetlands. I think you felt good learning about things that are happening in the world and getting involved and signing up to attend a meeting. And that's the idea of Headcount. I'm the chairman of Headcount now, and that comes out of Wetlands. And Headcount's now the biggest voter registration organization tied through music. We just, when Billie Eilish goes on tour or Harry Styles, we have kids who go on tour, we bank them in to the tour. Because when you're at a show, you might as well try to do some leverage this moment. And that was the Wetlands idea. And the idea of Headcount of going to festivals, going to shows, getting people registered. Now you can check your status for older people just real quick. And so that's pretty cool. That's the impact of Wetlands is now today, at least. Headcount still does it.
Amen.
Yeah.
So let's now talk about my favorite venue in Nashville, Brooklyn Bowl.
Thank you.
Didn't start here, but I'm sure glad it's here, but tell us about the origin of Brooklyn Bowl in Brooklyn.
So I had this Rock Club Wetlands, And I got, really, it went away after 9/11, and Elise already, it's ironic, right? It was at the exit of the Holland Tunnel, and he was like, no one will ever want to live here. And now that building's like, Jon Stewart lives above it for like $8 million, and Mike Piazza has got a 10.
JFK Jr.
It's just
did that.
ironic how the world changes. But when it went away, I realized how much I missed owning a music venue. I can talk to friends, there's some here, agents, and be like, what do you want to do? Let's do it, and I can just do it. And those power jams, Warren Hill, let's do this, let's do that, and you could just do it. And so I wanted to do another venue. I didn't know, and even though I didn't really make any money, it's not a great place to make a lot of money, but it's fun. So, but I didn't want to do another Wetlands. I thought about it. Wetlands is this famous thing, but I think these venues are so much about the space, the environment, the feel, and I just didn't feel I could like do brick and wood and do it again. I just didn't feel like and here's what's interesting, when Wetlands went away, everyone was so much like, I loved it. I loved that place so much. And its memory went from here to here. And I also didn't want to mess with that kind of. I felt if I did another Wetlands, whatever it was would be what people remember about Wetlands. And this happened when around this time my grandfather passed away. I don't know, I don't even think this is in the book, but hopefully it'll make sense. And they were like, do you want to see him in the casket or not? And I was there and I had to make a split, and I was debating it. And I went to see it. I was like, yes. And I went and saw him, and it was fine. But like then, that image of my grandfather in the casket came up when I thought about my grandfather. I couldn't get it out. Like it was always there. So that actually impacted me, that I decided not to do another Wetlands. Because I thought whatever I did, people's memory of Wetlands would be the new thing. It'd be, no matter what, if it was great or terrible, you'd remember the other thing would fade more. And I decided that the best way to kind of pay tribute to what it was, and it was so beloved, I felt that way more. Yep. And so then I was like, I'm gonna build something new, but I wanna do a venue. I was inspired, I've been to New Orleans a bunch, Jazz Fest. And anyone who goes to New Orleans and Jazz Fest, I really had that image of like late night after Jazz Fest. I went in the 90s in college and saw George Porter and the Running Partners at the Rock and Roll. And so it is inspired by that place, but we just decided to do it at tweak some things. By the way, I found this space. A lot of it's about this space. I found it walking the streets myself. If anyone here ever wants to like do a venue, like just walk it yourself. Here's what you do. Don't get this is at least one man's opinion. I've done this a couple times. When looking don't use a broker, your own broker. Go look for spaces. When you find one you like, have that person's broker become your broker too. So that then they are the full broker. There's no share. Versus they have to split it. Because then you move to the top. That broker is probably gonna want you to get it, because they're the sole one. You just have a good lawyer to make sure you don't fuck anything up and you know how to do it. That's how that had a huge role. The broker for the Brooklyn Bowl space in New York, we made ours. And so she then wanted us to get it. And we originally, it was only 13,000 square feet. It's 20 now. It's this amazing warehouse, 140 years old. We're getting ready to sign a deal. By the way, everything takes a long time. I found it in I think 2006. It took a year to even just get to the lease. A lease takes a year. And at the end, the lawyer's like, hey, we may not get this. It may go south. You need to go see if you can find another warehouse, something like it. We looked around. There really was nothing quite like this barn, this amazing place. So we're like, no, we need this. And we had 13,000 square feet. We got it. And it was going to be a much smaller music venue than it is today. There were 7,000 square feet next to it. And the landlord came to me and said, guess what? I have good news. I just made an agreement to do an art gallery in the other 7,000 square feet. So it'd be like, we're this room. The art gallery's on the other side of the wall. And I knew that actually we need to take this wall down. I need the whole thing. So, and I just didn't know it till he said it. Like this, and he had made a handshake with the guy. I'm like, you gotta let me, I knew when he told me I rented that, my heart, like, so I called I'm like, we've gotta get this. And the landlord was like, if you'll tell us today, we'll give it to you. But you have to let me know today. And we went from that, and if he had said I can't do it because I had made it a hand, I wouldn't be here also. By getting then to 20,000 square feet, it made it an 800 cap concert venue. It was gonna be like 3, the music area is much smaller because we still had the lanes. So that was a good move. There's a couple moments in my life, going to that Dead show, grabbing that extra space, the Capitol Theater.
Hang on, we're coming back to that one in a minute.
Sometimes you just lean in, or you got to pick it, and go hard. But I'm thankful, and a lot of it. I have Max Blauner at Wetlands. Peter, why you want to? Marvin Ravikoff, Jack Nastro. These building owners became important part, like, to get the space. Now it's easier. I'm more established. When you're young and stuff, it was hard. A lot of lunches where you don't talk about the deal for 90%, for an hour and a half. You just talk about life and things. And then at the very end of the lunch, you get down to it. And here's a good one. So the Capitol, this guy, Marvin Ravikoff, he takes over the Capitol Theater, famous music venue, in 1984. He's like, Peter, the only thing in the theater were the birds. And he had a hole, and he renovates it. And his wife, 30 years later, he just does bar mitzvahs and weddings. He's like, why do you want to do these concerts? You do the Truitt wedding. I got Jim working here. I hire 50 caterers for the day. It's a great business. Why do you want to do these concerts? They're so hard. And I'm like, because I love, I want to do the concert. So he did this. His wife, Norma, said, Marv, you're 80 years old. You got to sell the theater. You've had it 35 years. So he said, okay, Norma, I'm going to sell the theater. So he would meet with people to sell the theater. And at the end, each time, he'd be like, Tom, I like you, but this deal has taken a long time, too long, and we got to add $100,000 because of my time. It just took too long. So he changed. You would have agreed, $2 million, whatever, and he moved it at the very end. And most people, he'd say, Peter, you should have seen him. They'd walk away. They'd, no, we had a deal, $100,000. And they'd walk away and say, when they were leaving, they'd always be turning around, waiting for Marv to be like, okay, I'll do it. But he didn't want to sell the theater. But he didn't tell Norma that he changed the deal. He just said, Norma, they walked away at the end. So he did that twice to me. He moved it $100,000 twice at the end. And each time I'd be like, Marv, I can't believe you're doing this, but I'm in. I want the theater. And he told me later he was waiting, that was his test. For $100,000, no shit, you take the Capitol Theater. And he just wanted someone that cared enough about the theater. If you cared about the theater enough, you do the deal. And that's what he was looking for. And there's a couple of people who walked away, and I just that's how I got the cap by doing it. And then this is interesting. So I rented. These theaters are not built for going to the concerts. Built in 1926. Thomas Lamb was the preeminent architect of these theaters. You guys have all been to theater, Beacon Theater or whatever, here every Orpheum or Fox. There's bathroom lines because they were built in the 20s for people to see a vaudeville show that was 85 minutes or 90 minutes with no in and out. You're not a 4-hour show or an opener and then a band and set breaks and 5 beers. It wasn't built for that. So they don't have the bathrooms. And this one didn't even have handicapped. And Marv was telling me, Peter, don't break the handicap. You just bring the wheelchair person. We have a big one in the women's room. You clear it out, and we bring it. So I'm like, Marv, we need handicap bathrooms. So there's a stationery store next to the Cap. We're like, we're gonna break the wall, get the stationery store. If anyone's been there, it's what's Garcia's now. I'm like, we're gonna build 4 handicap bathrooms, a giant bar, and a 250 cap small venue. He's like, Peter, great. You know, we're gonna break through. And I had a lease then. So I said, we'll put in a lease that at the end of the 30 years, we'll put the wall back up. But I need to be able to do this. And Marv had a son who was his partner who just like was fully against us doing this. Like, you're breaking, you know, maybe because I got the theater and not the son. I don't know how we're friends. So I needed this space. And his son, we were getting letters that we were breaking the lease. But I needed it. So Marv knew this. He sensed war coming and problems for the Capitol. So he came to me one day and said, Peter, he knew his son was being difficult, and he knew the right thing was we needed that. He said, I'm gonna sell the theater. I'm like, really? Because I just had to leave, you know. And he said, yep. I'm like, how much? He goes, $11.5 million. I was okay, well, you know. First of all, this is a rock palace. It's priceless. I don't even know how you value it. And to build this today would take like 8 years and $100 million. I don't think it's doable. And I had just done, when you do a lease, you get the environmental inspection, the structural. I had done all that. I knew it was good. I'm like, Marv, I'm gonna buy it. I just said, I'm gonna buy it. And it was a Friday before Passover. I knew he'd go home and he'd be with Howie over the weekend, and he would have come back and be like, Peter, I'm never selling the theater. Because Howie would have been like, Dad, you're not selling this theater. So I needed to buy it then, on the spot, because I really thought by Monday or Tuesday, he'd pull back. So I said, Marv, and at this time I had money from an investment, like I had some money in the bank. I often don't, it goes up and down. I'm like, I'm gonna go to the bank. I had a lot of money, I'd taken over the Cap, we had $1 million. I said, I'm gonna go get $1 million bank check right now. And I'll buy it as is. Give me 6 months to close. I'll buy it right now. He did not expect me to, but he was doing this to protect the Cap. He wanted me to get it. So I wouldn't have to ask for any approvals. Once you own it, you can do anything you want. Much easier than a lease. You have to get approvals from landlords. Harder. I went to the bank. And I called the money guy, and I was like, I gotta do this now. And I got the check. We got a 1-page piece of paper. We got the lawyers. I bought it as is. And I had 6 months to close. Later, I found out that I couldn't get the rest of the $10 million from a normal bank because I had no experience. I mean, it was a bigger, whole other story. It's in the book. But I bought the Cap Theater on the street at that moment. And I bought it that day and grabbed it. Because I know it's 11. I mean, this thing's the best, and that's how I bought the Cap on the street. When he gave me that little opening, I grabbed it.
Another sliding door moment.
Yeah.
So you see a pattern here. He's getting bigger and bolder and more audacious. And now let's talk about Fare Thee Well. Holy shit! How did you pull that off? Like I said, Walt Disney, P.T. Barnum, and Bill Graham.
Well, I tried to get a lot of no's lead to yeses. That's in the book. You know, when you want to have an artist do something, a lot of times it'll start with a no, but you might get a call later. I have a good one, and I think I see his representative, his great agent, just walk in the room. When we took over the Cap, we threw out the idea of Bob Dylan playing New Year's, which doesn't really, he's not the perfect New Year's, but we were like, Bob Dylan, New Year's Eve. And we reached out to Brian Greenbaum, who I think's here, and said, how about because Dylan for New Year's Eve, the first New Year's Eve. And they came back and were like, not gonna happen. Sorry, you know, it's not right. But then a couple of days later, they called, and Brian called to Anthony Makes, who was booking, and said, well, what about opening the theater? I hadn't thought about opening because we already had Bob Weir. You know, we just didn't think opening. We thought New Year's. Never thought to ask about opening. The obvious is obvious till you miss it. Of course we should have asked about that. We asked about New Year's. But by asking for New Year's, even though it did not happen, they came back later and said, Bob, what about opening the theater? And that's how Bob Dylan opened the Capitol. because we had tried for something else, and I tried for the 40th anniversary for the Grateful Dead to do something, and I did not get it. But obviously aware, and the key for me to get Fairly Well was really Phil Lesh. And I don't know if this is being filmed, it's not being streamed hopefully, but I'll just tell the story, you know. Not that it's, you know, it's just Phil was doing a different thing. He plays with different people, new people, young people learning the music. And one cool thing I've gotten to do, Phil's doing 9 shows in October. I get to put together the bands that are coming up. And so I've brought a lot of those Wetlands, you know, young people, the jam, the guys from Mo or Soul Live or String Cheese, or, you know, getting Chris Robinson or Jackie Green or Luther Dickinson or Robert Randolph into these bands, or Marcus King we're gonna do for the first time. And Phil loves that. It's new, it's different. So he didn't really want to go do a thing again. He was done. And by the way, it's hard to get someone to do something like a 50th anniversary if they won't answer the phone. Like literally you couldn't get to them. A lot of the people trying to do big Dead 50 things couldn't reach, and even their agent, I think, was having trouble. The Leshes were not answering the phone really about it. But they had to come to the Cap. I signed a deal with Phil. He played the Cap, and he and his wife Jill were like, we love it here. We'll just play here. And people from Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Connecticut, we won't play Boston, DC will base here. That's what we did. I signed this huge 45, I'm like, because I knew that stuff never fades. The Dead live, I don't know how, like, and we're about to do our 100th show with Phil since we reopened it. You can hear that I've been at a lot of them. And it's all sold out. It sells out before we do the lineups. It never fades, that music. We'll talk about that later. I just knew it wouldn't fade. I signed this big deal with Phil, 45 shows in like 2 years, you know. So he had to come to the Cap to play the shows. So they had to see me, because otherwise they weren't I couldn't call and get through. So, and they even came once and like avoided me because they knew Pete Shapiro was coming to talk about Dead 50, and they like based in the corner where like these guys are the tech guys. So I couldn't get to them. But eventually I got to them, to Jill, and like we sat in my cave basement, and I said, you know, this is the right thing to do for the scene, for the music, you know, put it to rest, you know. And so we did this amazing thing, and what's ironic is it was supposed to be kind of an ending, and it became a new whole beginning for the music in a lot of different ways. It was just beyond, you know. And everything I say a lot, and it's true, it's in the book, the weather went right. That's one of the biggest things about Fare Thee Well. It was like 75 degrees, no humidity, every day. When you have that weather, people here who are into business know, like, it impacts everything, I believe. Loading's easy, everyone's in a good mood, waiting on line's not a problem. People are smiling, security guys are in tie-dye. Like it's good vibes. I really think if it's raining, obviously you're fucked. But and it's just hard to recover. If you got wet and it stops raining, listen, we'll take fair weather, it's no big deal. And then I do everything, then you just have to set the table for the magic to happen, but you need a good break. Like you need the right, and we just got literally perfect weather. And I swear, I think people's moods lift.
And something about a rainbow happened.
Yeah, and then there's, we should show, the first day.
It's on the back of the book.
We did it in Santa Clara. Maybe you can see it trying to hear a rainbow. That's Santa Clara Stadium. And so this event had a little bit of controversy. Like I brought Trey in. I grew up going to Fish shows and Dead shows. For me, it wasn't that hard to know that the Dead and Fish together, Trey playing, it's like, this is not that smart. But it ended, you know, I knew 1 + 1 was 5. But there was a lot of hazardous about it. When we went on sale, here's an interesting one. The Grateful Dead never sold a digital ticket online. Ticketmaster sold the first online ticket in 1996. Jerry Garcia died in 95. They never sold a Ticketmaster.com ticket. So you don't really know what the demand and the size is if they've never sold it. It was all mail order. So when we went on sale for Soldier Field, I remember I was at kids' soccer game, waiting for the noon thing, and my partner on the gig, Mike Luba, called me. He's like, I'm on the phone with Ticketmaster, and they can measure how many people are in the queue at the website waiting to go in to buy or buy. And they said there's more people in the queue to buy tickets than any concert they had ever done in America to that date. More than, I think Zeppelin London was the biggest, but we could have sold the stadium 50 times. Because everyone would have bought every day times 8 tickets or 6 times 3, and it was 700,000 individual people times 2 million, So we were like, oh, this is all great. It blew out in 1 minute, but then they go on Craigslist and it's like 10 days. They don't even have the ticket. When you see stuff on Craigslist, be careful. If you ever see, tickets are 12, those people don't even need to have, they could sell one and then get one. So that started going nuts. We went to the band, we're like, we've got to do more shows, or we're gonna have it's just too much pressure. We got them to say yes to California. We go and we launch this thing. There's all this, the Deadheads, is Trey gonna pull it off or not? And by the way, anyone who doesn't get a ticket is pissed. No one's happy. Like, I didn't get a ticket, but I'm gonna watch the stream, yeah! So no shit online, everyone's like, because they didn't get tickets. Everyone wanted a ticket. So it was real, and then this is in the book, we were like, we should do good, fun things, this big moment, like the tie-dye t-shirts. We gave everyone roses. We hired a skywriter. This isn't talked a lot about, but we wanted to put a peace sign above the stadium at like 4 or 5 o'clock while everyone's hanging in a lot. And the guy does the circle, and he does there's 3 lines and a peace symbol. And the last line he completely missed. It was like, he missed it completely. It doesn't. You can look online, Grateful Dead, I think Skywriter, and we were like, oh man, I hope this doesn't bode for what's coming. We're screwed. And people never talk about it now because right before, at the end of the first set, this rumbling started happening. We looked. It was not raining, but this unbelievable rainbow came out. That it was so. Look at it, goes right into Phil Lesh, and I was with Trixie, Jerry's daughter, Trixie Garcia, and I'm like, is that your dad? And she's like, yes. But it was so perfect, the timing and everything about it, that a lot of people then still think I made it. They were like, that couldn't be real. You couldn't have a rainbow come out like that. You saw so you made that, right? And obviously you can't really make, I mean, we could talk about that later, but I still get asked, about, that's it'll never get better than that moment, but it's a pretty, I'll take it.
Do you see what the Queen of England did this week in terms of rainbows?
So
She did
people
3.
were asking.
You only did 1.
I know. I got a couple notes being like, where are you in London?
Well, unfortunately, we're almost out of time, so I've got a speed round that I want to hit you with real quick. And we'll allow you all to ask a couple questions, so be ready. They're going to make us get out of here. Speed round. Jets or Giants?
Jets.
Yankees or Mets?
Mets.
That's Jets and Mets, always. First concert you remember going to?
Madonna, MSG, 85.
First record purchased with your own money?
Billy Joel, Greatest Hits, cassette.
Guilty pleasure artist?
Ooh, that's a good one. Tiffany. I think we're alone now. That's a good song. Trying to book her actually now.
One show you wish you had promoted?
I'm actually doing a private with like Bob, all these great guys, the 11. I'm like, we should get Tiffany for I Think We're Alone Now. Okay.
One show you wish you had promoted?
Led Zeppelin.
I know you're working on that one. Take more cash next
tried.
time.
Yeah,
There's
I
a
tried.
great story in the book about Peter showing up to meet Robert Plant with a lot of money, cold hard cash. We'll come back to it. Ginger or Marianne?
Marianne.
Nice. Wetlands or Brooklyn Bowl?
Brooklyn Bowl is Wetlands.
Brooklyn Bowl or Cap?
Or Cap.
Or the Cap?
The Cap's the best, it's the Cap. These are tough. It's like pick a kid. They are my
He
children.
wanted to do this cold, by the way.
Yeah. I would have told you to kill that question.
It's like, which of your children do you love the most? Back to your filmmaking. De Niro or Pacino?
Pacino.
Nice. Scorsese or Spielberg?
Scorsese.
Favorite tequila?
Oh, that's good. The one I had last night. That's-
Corin Capshaw or Michael Rapino?
That's an easy tie.
Such the
Come
politician.
on.
Desert Island Discs, you have 3.
Well, Stone Roses, I love. Maybe that Billy Joel Greatest Hits. I'm not even gonna say which volume, any of them. Just because that reminds me of being young. I had a cassette player. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything, by the way. When I started Wetlands, just so anyone, I went on Feel. And then, I guess Europe 72. That, and it's amazing to me. And when I was having a lot of stress, the Fare Thee Well thing was stressful because there were so many people who did not have tickets and they were not happy. And it's just, and the band wasn't gonna speak. So I was and I knew that if it went, it could either go well or not. And what happens is whatever happens, you can't change it. When these concerts we go to, that's why I love at the end of a good one, it's done. And people go home and it stays with them. And you can't change, that's why I didn't do Wetlands, a second one. I didn't want to change that memory. And I knew that Fare Thee Well, like there's a lightning storm that came on Monday, the 6th of July to Chicago. If that lightning had come the night before, and we had to stop the show, evacuate the show, which I've had at other shows, it happens, my life would be different. I think I do. The experience of people at this event wouldn't have been what it was. And I knew going in, and that's like holding on to a horse. You guys all know when you have a big event, you just hold on. When you're putting on these big events, festivals, you can't, I'd go to bed at Lock-In Virginia at 2, 3 in the morning and say a prayer, and when I wake up, when I'm looking at the phone, I actually got to get on one day, so you don't want to get a call at 7:12 a.m. when you're putting on Lock-In. It's usually not good. Dude, this happened once. I didn't put this in there, I don't think. I saw the phone ringing in my back of my bus, and it said Phil Lesh. It was 7:12 a.m. And I was going, whoa. And you're kind of do I answer or not? Because you don't want to. You're this is not, and he's flying in. That day, we made arrangements to get a private plane to pick him up in Trinity, this area of California where no one is. They were in a family camping trip. And he didn't really want to come, but we got him to come to Lock-In, and we'll get him a plane. So I swear it was 7:12 and 4, maybe 8:12. It was 5 a.m. his time. He was taking this very early morning flight to make it to Lock-In. He's like, Peter, it's Phil. I'm like, hey, Phil, how's it going? He's like, the door of the plane is broken. Your plane is broken. They were having a problem closing the door. So they couldn't take that plane. And Phil's headlining Lock-In. There's 20,000 people playing that night. And he's like, I'm not going to make it. They have to get another plane. It's a busy weekend. They'll get a plane by 4 in the afternoon, California time. He's supposed to be playing then. So that's when you fucking have to become P.T. Barnum and all that shit, Bill Graham. Sorry, you got to figure out, we have to get a fucking plane to Trinity, California, right? We just got to figure it out. And we have 2, 3 hours, not long. And I don't know how I got on that, but sometimes the phone rings, you just hold your breath. But it is good to always take it. Maybe sometimes you don't, but I remember that one, Phil calling.
Always answer it when Phil Lesh is on your caller ID. So my final question is, unfortunately we're out of time, if you could talk to that 20-year-old kid who walked out in Drums in Space in 1993, what would you tell him today?
Thank you, good question. Thanks for doing this also. Step into that door. I stepped in. I really do believe that night, if I hadn't ended up on that path where the next morning I went to the library and did the film, I know I'm not here. I just would have had a different path. So I would have said, yeah, this is a good path. Because it is sliding doors. Either you go into that drum circle and go that a few weeks later to make a documentary that changes your life, or you just go back, you don't. And then your life's different that way. And this happens to all of us probably. Different, And I just went through it, and then each time I've tried to lean in, like whether I should take over Relics or not in the midst of a tough time, or the Brooklyn Bowl thing, and the bowl, and just the Marvin on the street corner buying the building. You just try to judge the moment and hope that you make the right call, and then you adjust to everything that goes from there. Usually, a lot of it's adjusting to things going wrong. That's the biggest thing I'd say. But you got to try. There's a great quote. Gary Player, the golf legend, says, he goes, it's funny. The more I practice, the luckier I seem to get. And I do think that's true for what we all try to do, these shows. You just got to tee it up and set it up, and then hope that you get that weather and that the performers come and the people come. You just got to sit, and go from there.
Ladies and gentlemen,
You want to do a question or two? You can do one.
again, I want to echo what I said at the top. He's going to be signing his books right out here in the hallway. I hope each of you will pick one up. You are my hero, and I can't thank you enough for everything you've done to make the world a better place for us music heads. Keep doing it. Long
Thanks.
live Peter Shapiro.
Thanks, Tom. You're always doing such cool things. Thanks.
I want to
Thank you, Tom. And thanks for what you do with it. Pushing to know more. He does this with other people all the time. So thank you, Tom.
I want to thank Jed, Hilly, and the Americana Music Association for allowing us to have this session. This is a fantastic event. I hope that if this is your first time here, you'll come back next year because it just gets better and better and better. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Peter Shapiro one more time.
Thanks, guys.